Arsenal stand at a defining crossroads, a club transformed by intent investment where a summer's spending spree has become the latest chapter in a story that began long before this flurry of transfer headlines. For fans who remember the high noon of the Invincibles, the last 2 decades have often felt like a slow unravelling, a slide from the very top into a landscape of compromise, patchwork squads and hope deferred. Yet within the noise of recriminations and nostalgia, a precise project has been quietly taking shape under a manager whose apprenticeship under elite coaching minds has matured into something more personal. Mikel Arteta arrived as a promising tactician and left as the architect of a new Arsenal identity. Intense, possession-focused, defensively disciplined and hungry for lines of play that blend youth and experience. Those tactical contours mattered. They guided recruitment and reshaped priorities on the training ground and in the transfer market. But coaching alone does not build a title challenge. Structures, funding and ruthless decisions do. That is why this summer's spending, eye-catching and polarizing, is not merely about acquiring bodies, it is a reflection of a choice to accelerate a timeline. Ownership has backed the project with significant resources, the sporting directors have targeted profiles to fit a clear blueprint, and the squad now bristles with options in practically every position. The question that hangs over every conversation, every punditry board and every pub debate is blunt. Will this seismic investment convert into a league trophy, or will it simply raise the stakes on a manager already running on borrowed time? To answer that, we have to accept complexity. Football is not chess isolated from emotion. It's a contest of momentum, form, injuries and psychology. Arsenal's previous near misses were not coincidental. They were the result of thinness in areas that, over a 38-game season, were exposed. So this window aimed to address those precise vulnerabilities, reinforcing midfield control, adding creative spark, deepening defensive options and finding reliable goal threat. Many signings fit that calculus, designed not for headlines but for balance. Yet even balanced teams need cohesion, and cohesion requires time. The new arrivals must learn the rhythm, the pressing triggers, the set-piece cues and the unspoken language that underpins team chemistry. That is the gamble. That Arteta's systems, now tested over 5 years, can absorb significant personnel turnover without a costly dip in continuity. Beyond tactics, there is psychology. The dressing room now carries amplified expectation. Where patience once allowed gradual reconfiguration, the new reality is binary. The supporters will not reward another season of near glory with politely worded optimism. They want the tangible, the memories of lifting a trophy, the communal catharsis of ending a drought that has become a generational wound for the club. That pressure is both an asset and a threat. It fuels hunger, demands excellence and sharpens focus, but it can also distort decision-making, harden nerves and magnify every mistake into a headline. For players who have tasted the raw edge of title races before, this may be familiar territory. For youngsters, it's baptism by fire. The club's footballing DNA has been rewritten in stages, from a core of emerging talents who formed the spine of the team to high-profile additions meant to accelerate conversion of promise into trophies. The blend has its logic. Youth brings energy, unpredictability, and long-term profit potential. Experience brings composure, game intelligence, and moments of decisive leadership. Arteta's challenge is to marry those qualities into a single identity on the pitch. In practical terms, the summer business has addressed clear needs: a drive to control the middle of the park more effectively, to add guile and goals in the final third, and to mitigate the injury risk that has derailed previous campaigns. It also signals a strategic pivot, away from gradualism toward ambition. A willingness to take immediate steps towards silverware rather than waiting for a perfect generation to mature. But money alone is not a guarantee. Scouting precision, recruitment fit and cultural assimilation are the bedrock of success. That is why recruitment philosophy matters as much as the headline fees. When signings arrive who understand their roles and the tactical demands placed on them, the transition is smoother. When arrival profiles clash with a coach's preferred patterns, the result is fragmentation. Arsenal's recent activity has suggested a coherent approach. Players signed for specific functional reasons, not merely for market appeal. Still, the inevitable adaptation period raises tactical questions about rotation, minutes management, and which combinations unlock the greatest collective output. Arteta will need to juggle fixtures, European commitments and the domestic grind while keeping a squad mentally fresh and physically resilient. A secondary but potent factor in this equation is the competitive field. The Premier League is not a vacuum. Rivals respond, adapt and recruit. A spending spree by one club often triggers reactive measures elsewhere, and what looks like domination on paper can be countered with positional intelligence and long seasons that reward depth. Arsenal's plan assumes that their additions not only improve their starting 11, but also strengthen the bench sufficiently to withstand dips in form and the inevitable injury crises. This is where squad architecture and medical conditioning become as important as transfer valuations. Fans will watch early season fixtures as barometers. Strong starts will build momentum, mask imperfections, and allow confidence to compound. Slow starts, by contrast, will crank up pressure, funneling criticism and skepticism into every tactical nuance. The margin for error is slim. Yet there is reason for cautious optimism. The underlying progress over recent seasons is measurable. Improved defensive organisation, a clear identity, and a culture of demanding intensity. Those foundations matter when integrating new faces because they reduce the transactional cost of change. When club philosophy is embedded, players can slot in because the club's DNA provides a common language. On the other side of the ledger sits ownership and its role in framing success. Financial backing has been decisive, but it also creates expectation. Investment lengthens fringes but shortens leashes. The board's appetite for patience has its limits, and measurable return on investment rarely corresponds to neat timelines. Ambitious windows invite scrutiny, and every setback becomes a test of resolve. Yet the club's desire to erase 2 decades of frustration is not solely about silverware. It's about restoring global stature, commercial value, and the intangible magnetism that comes with constant success. Trophies breed interest, attract talent and simplify narratives. Achieving that cycle would vindicate expensive summers, but failing would force existential questions about strategy, recruitment and leadership. The human element is as crucial as fiscal muscle. Players must internalize the club's mission. Coaches must translate grand designs into weekly rituals. Supporters must temper partisan fervor with realism while still demanding excellence. This triangular alignment determines whether bold plans become sustained legacies or fleeting headlines. Looking forward, key variables will determine the arc of the season. Injury management, the successful integration of new signings, tactical adaptability when opponents adjust, and the psychological resilience of a squad now expected to win rather than merely to compete. Each match will be a referendum on recruitment and planning, each international break a test of conditioning, each cup tie a probe into depth. The season is a long litmus test. In the end, success is rarely the product of single decisions. It is the accumulation of marginal gains, the quiet victories in preparation rooms, and the small but decisive choices made by a manager and his staff over months, not headlines. Arsenal's gamble is therefore both monetary and philosophical. A belief that decisive, well-targeted investment combined with an established tactical framework will convert potential into silverware. If it works, Mikel Arteta's legacy will be sealed as the manager who ended the drought and restored Arsenal to the uppermost shelf of English football. If it fails, the narrative will pivot to questions about timing, recruitment, and whether money bought traction or merely postponed uncomfortable choices. For supporters, the impending season is a study in contradictions, exhilarating in promise, precarious in delivery. The Emirates will fill with expectation, and the world will watch with interest. And whatever the result, this summer will be remembered as the moment Arsenal chose to define themselves, not by patience but by an audacious attempt to reclaim the summit. There are a few clear scenarios that could unfold, and each will carry deep consequences for everyone connected to the club. In the most optimistic reading, new arrivals click quickly. Defensive stability meets creative fluency, and rotation keeps players fresh across competitions. Momentum becomes infectious. The Emirates roars night after night, and the season's pressure is absorbed because results feed belief. That would vindicate recruitment and give Arteta the space to refine his ideas rather than revolutionise them. At the other extreme, recurring injuries and a failure to synchronise would create a toxic loop of results, headlines and doubt. The club's big spending would then be recast not as decisive ambition, but as a costly overcorrection. A more likely storyline is somewhere between those two poles. Incremental improvement, brilliant peaks and frustrating troughs, punctuated by moments that indicate genuine progress even if the ultimate prize remains uncertain. This middle path still represents growth. It demonstrates that the club can compete on multiple fronts and that the foundation is sturdy enough to support ambition. Whatever the narrative, football's granular details will decide the outcome. Training groundwork, the timing of substitutions, the management of minutes for key players, and the minute concentration during matches all matter. A single tactical tweak can unlock a stubborn opponent. A single defensive slip can turn a promising run into a worrying wobble. Those micro-events compound over a season. The internal culture of the dressing room will prove decisive. Senior figures will have to protect the collective psyche, guiding young players through intense scrutiny and modelling the standards required every day. Coaching staff will need to manage expectations externally, keeping the wider narrative focused on process rather than panic. Off the field, the recruitment model will remain under intense analysis. Fans and analysts will examine each transfer not just on its initial impact, but on how it shifts strategic margins. The financial case for big windows becomes stronger if success follows. Prize money, sponsorships and commercial growth are the practical returns that justify heavy spending. If success does not arrive, the club faces hard decisions about valuation, strategy and patience. Rival clubs will also react and adapt. A single club surge often forces others into the market, producing a race that accelerates improvement across the league but also compresses margins. That competitive dynamic adds another layer of complexity to Arsenal's challenge. For supporters, the coming months will be a lived experience of hope and anxiety. Each match will carry extra weight. Social media will amplify joy or despair. And yet, regardless of trophies, there is value in the process. Building resilience, embedding a tactical philosophy, and establishing a pipeline of youth stepping up to first-team demands. Those are the durable wins that create sustained success. In short, Arsenal's summer was a decisive statement. It is now a test. If the club can translate ambition into consistency, the long wait for the title could finally end. If not, the window will be studied as a moment when intent met the unforgiving realities of elite competition. For the players, coaches and fans, the stakes are immediate and personal. Pride, history and the desire to end a narrative of longing. For the club's leaders, the stakes expand to legacy and the sustainable health of an institution that sits at the heart of thousands of lives. Regardless of outcome, this campaign will be dissected, celebrated or mourned, and its lessons will shape Arsenal's choices for years to come. That makes this period not only a sporting experiment, but a civic event for a global fan base, a community invested in every pass, every tackle and every decision, waiting to see whether belief finally will be rewarded with glory.